Stand by for the count. In three, two, and we're live.
What's up, Mortgage Coach community? Dave Savage here, and I have a very special guest today, Trevor Moawad. Trevor, you don't know the backstory on how I found your book, but my son, who's a senior in high school this year, is playing lacrosse for Syracuse next year. And going into the year, we were like, the most important thing this year, keep working out, be a great team leader, but get good in the head, like really work on, being your best when it matters most. So I came across your book and absolutely love it. So nice to meet you, my friend.
Dave, it's a privilege to join you. I know too much about mortgages, but I love the community and I love the fact that you have the mortgage coaching. Give me some context on that. So this is a community within your world that helps other people within this space, like in the professional development side.
Yeah, so mortgage coach, our whole mission is helping a loan officer coach a family to make a smarter mortgage decision. So we're a technology company that gives loan officers a tool to help a family make a better decision. But then I also believe when it comes to technology, you need to give people training. And so I do a lot of webinars, we do a lot of personal development so that they can be a mortgage coach to a family. So
can you give me your loan, an example of the community, like in terms of, someone, yeah. I bought 3 homes now, and just sold mine, and now I'm in the rental world as I'm in Manhattan Beach, trying to figure out where exactly I want to live. But in the post-divorce world, never thought I'd be saying that, but that's life sometimes. But is it more helping them choose the right price relative to mortgage or the right bank to title with, or just help me get some context. I'm fascinated about my brother, a realtor up in Seattle, John L. Scott. So it's always interesting to learn.
Yeah. So most times, like when you got a loan, your loan officer gave you a fee worksheet and said, here's your rate, here's your payment, and here's your cash to close.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, that's a transactional loan officer. There's not a lot of value other than, did he keep his promises? Did he do things on time? And what we coach people is, hey, you got to keep your promises. You got to do things on time. Those are table stakes. But let's help that family make a better decision. Like, let's look at different loans over time. Like, which loan is the best over 3 years and 7 years and the total cost? And then let's give you some advice. Like, hey, what if you took this loan versus this loan and you prepaid your mortgage? Which loan would help you build wealth with real estate faster? So our whole philosophy is go beyond the transaction and deliver the best advice. And you probably don't know this, maybe your family does, but out of the top loan officers in America, the top 1% do over 100 loans a year. 34% of them use Mortgage Coach. So we've got a lot of very high performing mortgage professionals that use Mortgage Professionals. So I'm always just trying to how do we help them be better?
Yeah, and congratulations on your son too. The Syracuse, it's a great league, great lacrosse up in the Northeast. And, I know with Florida State football, we played up at Syracuse a number of times. So it is way the hell up there. But anyways, excited to join you, excited to join your community today.
Well, I'm excited to have you because I've read your book. I did the audio book. And it was one of those books there's books where you skim it for the big idea. And then there's books that you read the whole thing. And your book was one of those books where I read the whole thing. So Mortgage Coach community, before I start asking Trevor questions, I think it's important to know this is a guy that worked for Nick Saban at Alabama. And I think that's where you got your first break. Was that where you got your first break as a performance coach?
Well, no. I was raised by, my dad was one of the original authors of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. He went into peak performance education in 1974. So he worked with a guy named Lou Tice. They were involved in the early origins of a company called the Pacific Institute. So I was born in the mid-'70s. I was raised my whole life. My dad worked with IBM, NASA, Coca-Cola, and had a number of series. So I was raised by somebody who obviously worked within this industry and was successful. But in terms of professional sports, I was the director of training at IMG Academy. biggest sports training academy center in the world, 600 acres. And then I began my work in pro sports 2001 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Spent 8 seasons as a sports psychology consultant, starting at 24 years old in the NFL. So I would do that kind of weekly or on the weekends. And then I would be back in Bradenton, Florida at the academy during the week with 1,000 high school athletes from all over the world. And then a wide variety of CEOs, Maria Sharapova, Michelle Wie, Freddie Adu, all the best young prodigies. So it's a pretty cool place to grow up for a kid from Lakewood, Washington, up in the Northwest.
No doubt. Well, there were some
Nick
stories.
Saban was obviously, on a consumer-facing perspective, the big break. Obviously, Coach was, I think 2 years ago, Forbes, the 11th best leader in the world, according to Forbes, and maybe 5th in the world, according to Fortune magazine. I know tons of people in the business world follow the system of the process. I spent 8 years with Nick, about 35 days a year, and I, had a chance to be part of that architecture, so, like I said, your community won't know me as much. The book was really our first step into the public. We don't market ourselves the same way the business community I see now does. But I'm excited to be out more involved and spend some time with you today.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. And one story I want to make sure comes out in this conversation, and it was a story that you told in the book when you started working with them, and the big goal was just reduce the amount of negative things. I think you said stupid shit people say out loud. Could you tell that story a little bit and then help bring that lesson to our space?
Yeah, I think a couple early stories stand out. One of the interesting things is sometimes now, as I spend time in the business community, they'll look at sports and say, well, how does that relate to business? Well, sports is the ultimate business. It's an EBITDA-driven business where you win, hundreds of millions of dollars change when you can build a program, can win. It changes enrollment. When you look at Clemson, their enrollment's up, I think, over 400%. People want to go to Clemson, South Carolina, because the football program wins. I didn't decide the rules. I didn't understand it. I'm from the West Coast. I've lived half my life in the South. But, when I got my first Alabama game, I remember looking around like, what's wrong with these people? But it is big business, and it is massive, and it is huge. And our players and our organizations are big. And, about 35% of our coaches in pro sports are fired every year. In my 19 years in pro sports, I've never signed more than a 1-year contract, and Sports Illustrated says I'm the best in the world at this, and I've never signed more than a 1-year contract. There is no sports psychology. There are no Tony Robbins. There are no Grant Cardones. Nobody like that exists in sports. There is no self-help industry. It's the best of the best. And there's very few people that have done, had the opportunity to even have a job like I have in sports. And, a lot of that credit goes, obviously my early years to Tom Coughlin, but Nick Saban was a big believer. He'd been utilizing different resources for a long period of time. But early on, a football program is 120 athletes, 85 scholarships, and about 35% of your players turn over every year. So if you think about that, if you run a business, and you're losing 30 to 40% of your people every year, you have to develop a program, because you can't have your best players take their habits with them. You have to develop a system and an architecture. So when Dave Savage moves on, the next person that comes into Dave's role understands what you need to do to sustain excellence. And it's all about sustaining excellence. And I don't think that's any different than in the real estate or mortgage business. It's great to have a good year. It's better to do it year after year after year, so you can get on one of those fucking HGTV shows and run around and have your $1 million mansion, sort of, which people like me, I'm not actually as much as I've spent time in sports. I watch a lot more HGTV than ESPN. But, what I remember, though, in our first year, we got there, and I'd spent the season before with Coach Saban with the Miami Dolphins. And we were 6-10, and Alabama was coming off a tough year. And in that first meeting, one of the things I remember in those early meetings was, and coach is like 5'8" and very introverted, very quiet, not this fire and brimstone, rah, just incredibly bright, incredibly smart, incredibly well researched, confident, but not no ego, knows where he's really, really strong, knows where he wants to get better, believes in the philosophy that you don't need to be sick to get better. Problems shouldn't drive your need for improvement. Greatness should drive your need for improvement. And a couple stories I remember early on were as we would talk to the players was, number one, coach held up an apple in his left hand and a bag of Doritos in his right hand and said, do you really need a world-class nutritionist to tell you which is better for you? And it was a fascinating point. And he said, the question is, why should you choose an apple? Because until you can make choices that simple, we'll never win. And, when you think about it, everybody's looking for the most fucking complicated stuff. I look at the self-help industry now, and it's like the writers have 7,000 PhDs, and all these people won't read a book unless there's, PhDs and complicated and meditating and, all these things. And man, that's not how we look at it. Like if a bag of Doritos tastes better than an apple, but at a foundational level, if you don't put the right fuel in your body in a physiological sport where your body makes your money, at the basic level, you'll never win. So learning how to do simple better was critical. One of the other early stories that really jumped out was a story that we'd heard at Toastmasters about one of the top business and magazine entrepreneurs who was about to get kicked out of high school, was really struggling, but he promised his mother he'd take the SAT. The SAT in the 80s had two parts, a math part and a verbal part, both scored out of 800 points. And as the story would be shared with the players, it would turn out that as the young man took the test, in May, got a score back in June, got a 1480 out of 1600. Well, he was stunned, cognitive dissonance. He was obviously surprised. His mother, knowing her son did what any mother would do, she said, did you cheat? He said, I did everything I could to cheat, but the Scantrons were too small and number 2 pencil, and said, you mean to tell me you're really this smart? So all I can tell you is I took the test. Well, because he thinks he's smart, as a senior, he starts going to class. And now that he goes to class, he's not hanging out with the people he used to when he didn't. Teachers see him, start to treat him differently. Kid graduates, goes to community college, goes to a 4-year in Kansas, goes on to the Ivy League, becomes this incredible business entrepreneur in the magazine industry. Well, as the stories explained, you're like, okay, well, the guy, always had the aptitude. It just must have learned how to unlock it. But as he told the story, he said, no, that's not the story. 12 years after all his success, he received a letter in the mail from Princeton, New Jersey. Turns out the SAT board, true story, periodically reviews their test-taking procedures and policies. The year he took the test, he was one of 13 people sent the wrong score. His actual SAT score was a 740 out of 1600. And so as the story was shared with our players, it was, people think that he said that the 1480 is what changed his life. But the 1480 didn't change his life. When you learn to act like a 1480, that's what changed his life. And what does a 1480 do? He goes to class. And I think back to those early origins, and everybody's looking for the most complicated way to win. The 5-step formula, the 8-step formula. There is no 8-step formula. It's, can you do the foundational elements that are going to allow you to be good, to understand mortgage loans, to understand relationships. 49% customer retention is one of the most important things in the business world. And 49% of customers leave a business because they were treated by indifference by one or more of the employees within the companies. So it goes back to relationships. The Census Bureau just evaluated the Fortune 2000 companies and said, what are the 15 things you're looking for in hiring top employees now? Well, number 11 was your grades. Number 13 was the school you went to. Number 1 was your attitude. Number 2 was your communication skills. So sports are no different. Like, can you do the basic things well? And when people are doing an autopsy right now of where they're at in their career in May of 2020, if you're not doing well, you're probably not doing the things that good people do in your industry, or you're an asshole. Maybe you're not born that way. Like, asshole is behavior. Being a great person's behavior. It's how you handle things. I think one of the first things for people to understand is, do you know what it takes to do well in whatever you're doing? And are you doing those things? Because when you take over a football program or a baseball program or a basketball program, and I work in the NBA and college football, obviously a lot in the business world as well, more behind the scenes. But, do you understand what conscious competence looks like? And are you doing those things? And it's really easy to evaluate, because an average program becomes average through average behavior, not average aptitude or talent, and so your behavior is what gets ahead of your success. People always ask me about Russel Wilson. Russ and I formed a business together, Limitless Minds, with his older brother Harrison and DJ Eidson. And I'm often asked, like, what separates Russell at 5'10"? And, Russell, $36 million a year is the highest paid quarterback in the history of football. As a guy who was asked to leave as a junior because they wanted to go with a 5-star guy after being a 2-time All-ACC player. But it's what he does was so far ahead of before he ever got good. So I think that's the first thing. I know you asked a different question, but I think that's the first thing people have to understand. Like, there is no magic. LeBron won in LeBron's last NBA championship. Every press conference, he wore a hat that said there is no magic pill. People need to get that. It takes what it takes. You don't want to do it, it's okay. But the people that are making it are doing it. And if you haven't done it up till now, if you start doing things differently going forward, it could be different. That can work negative, like we saw with Tiger Woods in 2011, when all of a sudden all these things that you did, you don't do, and now you become just another golfer. And or it can be all these things that you do that change your trajectory and allow you to be better. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing, I don't ever talk about positive thinking. I don't talk about meditating. I don't talk about mindfulness. And I know those are the brands. I know that's how everybody makes money in this industry. But I live in an industry where people don't want help. So I got to take a message to these guys that everybody's going to buy in and believe in. So I can't bullshit. And a lot of people in your industry want to be bullshitted to. Like, I don't have a population. Like, the population at the highest level of sports or military is bullshit proof. So one of the things as we started to study positive thinking versus negative thinking is, as great as positive thinking and as powerful as it can be, a lot of the data was anecdotal, and it was hard for people. It was a hard reach for people to make. But negative thinking worked negatively somewhere between 83 and 100% of the time. And whether your data was through the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic, it was so clear to prove. There's nobody in this audience that could say, I'll tell you what, the more dumb things I watch, stupid things I say, bad things I say about myself, bad things I say about my employees, bad things I say about the mortgage industry, how much I hate my job, how much I talk about it, all those things really work hand in hand to help me be an incredible mortgage broker. Like, nobody can say that. You might do those things, but you succeed in spite of those things, not because of those things. So as we started to look at the data, we realized that if you could lessen the negative without ever being more positive, that in itself was the game changer. And negativity is most powerfully carried, Dave, through language. When you say something out loud, it's 10 times more powerful than when you think it. And negativity is a multiple of 4 to 7 times more powerful than positivity. Why is that true? It goes back 10,000 years. You read the book. It goes back to hard wiring. 10,000 years ago, if I wasn't assuming the worst with dinosaurs and fires and all the risks, if I didn't expect the worst, I could die. But 10,000 years later, although it may feel different now in this pandemic, but 10,000 years later, it's not like that way. We don't have to live expecting the worst. But negativity is that much more powerful. So we just made a bet based on the data and based on the science that when we looked at it, if you said negative things out loud about the Heat, the program, about not playing, your circumstances, going on the road, that you increase the probability that would happen by 70 times. So when I'd say, I don't want to be here, or I can't sell, or I hate this program, or I can't play for this coach, you increase the probability as you verbalize that by 70 times. We realized the inner thoughts were hard to change. But they weren't the most powerful things, that everybody's inner thoughts were kind of all over the place. but we always controlled what we said out loud. So if we could not say stupid shit out loud, it could really change the trajectory of our program. And that was our starting block. And the best advice I'd give people, if you just monitored what you said out loud, it would change your life.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful, especially in today's market. People are, whining about things. The news is full of things that do not make us our best. And I think just about every leader in the mortgage business would love to create a better culture, a more positive culture, and just getting people to stop saying the wrong things out loud.
But you're missing it. You're like, it's not a more positive culture, it's a less negative culture. That's the win.
Got it.
Because when you tell people you've got to be more positive, I went through a divorce with like the most amazing person in the world. And when people told me like, hey man, just stay positive, think of all the people you get to meet, all it did was just piss me off. I got married not to meet people, so I wasn't at that state. I couldn't make that jump. And a lot of times positive thinking, it requires us to move to point B way before we're ready to. Hey, just stay positive. We're going to get through this time. Well, like, not being negative is your first step. You want to come to the University of Alabama and you want to learn to eat from Amy Bragg, the top nutritionist in the world. The first thing you're going to learn is not to eat well. It's how to not eat shitty. That's the first thing. And the first thing you'll be told is, if you can order it, if you can pull up and order it with your mouth, let's stop that for 3 months, or some finite amount of time. And just that step, you can still go to Subway, you still go to other places, but any place that you can order through a drive-thru, you stop. Just by doing something like that, you're taking a huge step by limiting your options. So, and people that are going to say, well, what about venting? I need to vent, Dave. There's no science that says venting helps you. I think the second point with negativity is the externalization. The second part is consumption. We watch 3 minutes of cable news. It increases our probability by 27%. We'll say we had a terrible day. That's just the truth. It doesn't make it right or wrong. But in the military, in some of the cool places I've been, they take courses like modern media that teach you, this is CNN, this is MSNBC, this is the BBC, this is CNBC. This is who spends money advertising with them, and that's who they're responsible to, not to the truth. And those companies also understand the negativity statistics. So it's their job to drive negativity because you're 70 times more probable to respond to that than you are a counter positive message. So if you watch it and consume it, then you're willfully, you're bringing it in. And it's been really tough for people during this time because I want to be educated, but I also want to give myself a chance psychologically, not to, make myself almost feel like I'm a statue, like I can't move. I'm so paranoid. I'm so filled with fear. So what I've done, I haven't watched an ounce of news. I watched 48 minutes early on, and it took me 3 days to recover. Now, I was raised differently. We didn't watch the news when I grew up. We could watch the Sonics. We could watch the sports. We could watch the weather. I wasn't allowed to listen to country music. That's what my dad believed. We really minimized the negativity. Now, I lived in the real world, so I was out and I dealt with it. But we knew I'd get plenty of it there. But, so minimizing consumption, going to local websites, going to state websites. I work for one of the NBA teams here as a strategic advisor, and we get great updates. You got to be 6 feet apart. This is the situation. This is what's happening in LA County. These are the things. So I know what I need to know. All right, if I'm going to go hike, I'm going to go to Pasadena. I can hike up there. There's nobody, and this is what we know about the stores, what we know about the masks, all those things. You don't need to watch 35 minutes of some dude on his Twitter account making fun of people, wherever you land on that, or this side doing this and that side doing that. And, because it's become a partisan issue, and you're not going to benefit from that. So that's just the truth. Now, if you want to watch 8 hours of news, then you watch 8 hours of news, but there are consequences to it. And I think that's the biggest point, Dave. There are consequences to controllable negativity. When you're surrounded by assholes, there's nothing you can do. Sometimes you have customers that are really tough. you deal with it, you manage with it as best you can. But to the degree that you can control it, that's all it takes. What it takes does. As much as neutral thinking is a big part of it, what it proves is that negativity works negatively, and not so much the inside. There's a path to dealing with that, but you got to focus on the controllable parts first, what you say and what you watch.
Yeah, and what your actions are. So let's close out on it takes what it takes. So guys, you're mortgage professionals. If you're watching this, if you're part of the mortgage coach community, you either are the best of the best or you want to be the best of the best. That's why you're here. You would not be watching this if you were not one of those two people. And let's just close out on the concept of it takes what it takes. And some of the, I think you called it mental advertising. Like get clear on who you want to be and what are the best of the best doing. Let's just close out on why it takes what it takes and what do the best of the best do when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you study the science of influence, that's one of the things we wanted to learn early on, right? When you have employees, when you have athletes, when you have people that are working for you, you have a son. The simple fact of the matter is, what's my influence over me versus Dave's influence over me? And the science says I'm 10 times more influential over myself than you are. So other people can market to you. You can do it. You can believe, hey, make this many outgoing calls. This is how you follow up. This is how you sustain a relationship. This is how you build it. This is the software. But at the end of the day, what you believe to be true about you is going to be most powerful. So that's important. What I say out loud about what I can do. And for us, we don't really set outcome goals. Everything's based upon a process. Everything's based upon how we do it, because we think during the course of a game, the scoreboard can be deceptive, but not what we're doing. So if we're down 17 points, we can still go out and play with a lower pad level. We can explode. We can accelerate. We can compete more. Whether we're winning or losing, that's what we want to focus on, the behavior. If we focus only on the outcomes and we're down 17 points, then it's easy to give up. So where you're at the end of Q2, is relative to your circumstances, which have been challenging, but where you could be at the end of Q3 or Q4, which we call neutral thinking. Hey, the past is real, but it's not predictive. So I think to your point, what's going to drive your success is going to be how you influence you and getting behind the best behaviors. Vince Carter, the basketball player, is the one that sort of gave me the phrase, it takes what it takes. And we were having a conversation. One of the programs I'd been to, had a bunch of athletes that got in trouble, and it happened from time to time. And he was like, how many of those guys want to be pro players? And I said, probably 7 out of 10. He says, and isn't it crazy that they think they could do whatever they want and be, make it to the, professional football? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he said, I'm 39 years old, and to play in the NBA, there's a set amount of things I'll either do or I won't do. I don't eat fast food anymore. I don't eat the snacks in the game day. I lift during the day of a game. I don't dunk as often in a game because I can't get back on fast. I sleep as fast. I sleep in a hyperbaric chamber. And I said, so what do you mean? Like there are no choices? Like choices in illusion? He said, yeah. Once you decide you want to go somewhere, you either do it or you don't. It takes what it takes. The path has already been predetermined. There have already been people who've done your job years before you did it, Dave, that were already really good. And there's nothing wrong if people don't want to do it. But it's when we want to go to bed at 5 and shortcut the process and then get mad when we don't get the outcomes. So it may take longer, but the best advice I can have is one of the cool things my dad always said to me is a year from now, you might wish you started today. So everybody looks at athletes and wants to say that they have some superhuman gifts that they just weren't bestowed with. That's not true. And how many people have you seen in your industry, Dave, that, maybe didn't have the aptitude that other people had, or the looks or the style or the whatever, and yet they kill it year in, year out because they do their job, and I think that that's the key thing. What makes people perform at a high level is successful people do what unsuccessful people don't like to do. There's no magic. And if you look at, go back to Albert E.N. Gray, the common denominator of success, in the insurance industry in the 1940s, where that sort of statement came out of, he really says it all. And it's a paper, it's about 15 pages, What Makes Great Insurance Salesmen. And he established, they do the things that great insurance salesmen do, and he outlines those things. And for he or she listening to this, either live right now, which is awesome because they're within that community, or hear this eventually, do an inventory of what you're doing and how that relates to what's good in your industry. But my last point, Dave, would be, so many people think a great athlete is all these things that he or she does, when in reality, I think what separates the best from the people that haven't got there yet is not what they do, but what they're willing not to do, what they're willing not to eat, what they're willing not to watch, what they're willing not to listen to, how they're willing not to watch ESPN during their season. They're willing not to eat after 8:00 at night. By not doing those things, they're willing not to say when they're frustrated, I suck and I'm never going to be able to get this thing done. They don't associate around negative people. They choose not to hang out in those environments where they can control it. By not doing, if people think about the 5 things they could not do right now, those things they could not do might hold the key to taking them to the next level and or changing their life as a parent, as a performer, as an athlete, as a health activist, as a mortgage broker in real estate finance, or as a realtor in commercial, real estate, whatever type of real estate you're working in. So those are some things I challenge. It takes what it takes. If you want to read the book, HarperCollins did it. My editor did Shoe Dog right before she did my book. So from Phil Knight, I felt like it was a little bit of a downgrade going from Phil Knight to me, but we had some fun with it. And also did Tim Grover's book, Attack. So I had a great group. It's really simple. It's 3 hours on Audible, and it's about 200 pages. And the whole book's designed to be simple. I think the self-help industry is like this bragging rights thing to be as fucking hard as it can possibly be, so nobody gets it. That's not what we want to do. We wanted you to read it and say, man, that makes sense. I could do that right now. Or I don't want to do that. And that's okay too.
So I would love Mortgage Coach Community. This is a book you need to read, you need to listen to. And then here's my challenge to you. This is a book we teach you, be leaders. The best mortgage professional is a teacher. So Trevor, if we wanted to buy a case, like if a loan officer wanted to buy a case, give it to their realtors, do a little book club with them, where would they go to get a case of these books? I know where to get one book.
I think we have some on wholesale at www.thinkbig-gofar.com/book. www.thinkbig-gofar.com/book. But
link down below.
Yep. And but you could also go anywhere, HarperCollins, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any place, and you could order them in bulk. They're we just came out in February, but it's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, which was awesome. That was a big goal for me. Personally, that if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. And my ghostwriter, Andy Staples, the top college football writer in sports. And it's about a lot more than sports. I know Dave can tell you that. And while it can help his son, I think this idea that you would learn more about neutral thinking, I think is really powerful. You can also follow me. I'm new to social media, so I'm kind of catching up at Trevor Moawad, TrevorMoawad on Instagram. Instagram, I understand. LinkedIn, I have no clue. I'm trying to figure that thing out. And Twitter, but at Trevor Moawad, TrevorMoawad. And we have a really cool B2C business at thinkbig-gofar.com. I could, and then I'm booked many times through Leading Authorities in keynotes, or Leading Authorities, or Limitless Minds for people who are looking for that. But my number one goal is you don't ever need to call me again. You don't ever need to read the book, that you got something out of the 35 minutes we did today. And I think the next step for you would be to read the book and be mindful. And my best advice is don't be a serial reader. People read my book and say, what can I read next? No, man, just fucking follow the book. You can't, I believe this, you can be overeducated. At some point, you've got to pick a philosophy and adhere to it. And learning is a fluid and a continual process, but you got to have your way you go about it and supplement it and become confident. If you're going to be a neutral thinker, if you're going to follow, our system, which I don't think is a philosophy, I think it's a way to live. I think it's a way to battle health challenges. I think it's a way to be successful. I think it's a way to navigate adversity and to also navigate many people whose success becomes their adversity.
Absolutely.
So hopefully that can be helpful to you. And all our website, or my social media is different things to help you. I mean, and hopefully, and I'm not Tony Robbins or Ed Milet or a lot of these guys who've made a lot more money. I love Ed Milet just at his podcast, and I know your community loves a lot of these guys that have 6 homes. And I rent a place. I mean, I've obviously owned some cool homes. Now I'm obviously living in Manhattan Beach, figuring out where I'm going to live full time. But I've been in the world just working, and I'm proud of it. And now we're trying to get the message out more ubiquitously, and to the degree that we can be helpful and equally helpful to your kids and your families in the same way we were with you, Dave. We're excited. And I think as you think about going forward, this idea of staying neutral, we really don't know what's going to happen next, but focus on the things you can do, the behaviors you can do to keep you psychologically healthy, physically healthy. And if you're furloughed or if you're going through some challenges right now, things that can keep you in your best position. So when things do normalize, you're in the best position to put your best foot forward.
So guys, I love this. I hope you wrote down neutral thinking. I hope you're going to really audit yourself in terms of what you're saying out loud, because it has so much more impact. Not just, we can't always control what we think,
No,
but we can control what we say.
yes,
And you could control the actions. 34% of the best loan officers use Mortgage Coach to deliver a family a total cost analysis. Go beyond the minimum standard. All the best of the best have to go beyond that. So Trevor, I appreciate you taking time to come in and bring your stories, bring your lessons, bring your passion. Hopefully we get you on a couple stages in the mortgage business, and you can bring some negative thinking, or not negative, you can bring some neutral thinking, and it takes what it takes to the mortgage space. So thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Be a privilege. Thank you.
Take care, my friend.
Thank you. We off?
Are we off, guys?
And we're out. Yep. We're out. Good job, guys.
So Trevor, seriously, dude, your book is